On the morning of November 16, 1983, the city of Flint, Michigan, was preparing for another ordinary school day. The streets were quiet. Parents were heading to work. School buses were making their usual routes. For 16-year-old Sheri Jo Elliott, it should have been just another Wednesday. Instead, it would become the last morning anyone would ever see her alive. Sheri Jo Elliott was a bright teenager with her whole future ahead of her. Friends described her as kind-hearted, responsible, and dependable. She lived with her family in Flint and followed a routine that rarely changed. Every weekday morning, she walked a short distance from her home to catch the school bus. It was a route she knew well, one she had taken countless times before. No one imagined that such a familiar walk could end in tragedy. As daylight broke across the neighborhood, Sheri left home carrying only what she needed for school. She expected to return later that afternoon. Her family expected the same. But when the school day came to an end, Sheri never came home. At first, there was confusion. Perhaps she had gone to a friend's house. Maybe she had missed the bus. Maybe there had been some misunderstanding. As the hours passed, those possibilities quickly disappeared. Something was terribly wrong. Her family contacted authorities. Within hours, officers began searching the area surrounding the bus stop. Neighbors were questioned. Friends were interviewed. Search teams combed nearby streets and wooded areas. Volunteers joined the effort, hoping someone had seen the missing teenager. But despite the growing search, there was no sign of Sheri. No witnesses who could explain what had happened. No immediate evidence pointing investigators in the right direction. It was as though she had vanished without a trace. The disappearance sent shockwaves throughout Flint. Parents who had always believed their neighborhoods were safe suddenly feared for their own children. Students arriving at school found themselves surrounded by worried teachers, police officers, and rumors spreading through the hallways. Everyone was asking the same question. Where was Sheri Jo Elliott? As each day passed, hope slowly began giving way to fear. Investigators expanded the search beyond Flint. Roads were checked. Fields were searched. Every possible lead was followed. The community remained determined to find the missing 16-year-old. But time was running out. 4 days after Sheri disappeared, the search came to a heartbreaking end. On November 20, 1983, her body was discovered along a rural road in Saginaw County, miles away from where she had last been seen. The discovery devastated everyone involved in the search. The outcome every family fears had become reality. Medical examiners soon confirmed investigators' worst suspicions. Sheri had been abducted. She had been sexually assaulted. And she had been fatally shot. The crime shocked investigators because of its brutality. There appeared to be no obvious motive. No known enemies. No indication that Sheri had been specifically targeted. She had simply been walking to school when her life was stolen. Detectives immediately launched a homicide investigation. Crime scene specialists collected every piece of physical evidence they could find. Witnesses were interviewed again. Composite sketches were considered. Tips poured into police stations. Investigators worked around the clock believing someone, somewhere, had seen something important. Yet every promising lead eventually reached a dead end. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months became years. The investigation remained active, but the answers Sheri's family desperately needed never came. No arrest. No confession. No justice. Only silence. For Sheri's parents, birthdays came and went. Graduation day arrived without their daughter. Holidays became painful reminders of the empty chair at the family table. Every passing year was another year without answers. Another year hopping the phone would ring with news that someone had finally solved the mystery. As America entered a new decade, Sheri Jo Elliott's case quietly joined the growing list of unsolved murders. Boxes filled with evidence were carefully stored away. Case files grew older. Witness memories faded. Investigators retired. And many feared the truth had disappeared forever. But hidden inside those evidence boxes was something science had not yet learned how to fully unlock. A silent witness, waiting more than 4 decades to finally reveal the identity of Sheri's killer. The days following Sheri Jo Elliott's murder were filled with determination. Investigators believed the person responsible would eventually make a mistake. Someone would come forward. Someone would recognize a vehicle, remember a suspicious stranger, or confess to a secret they had carried for too long. But that moment never came. Throughout the remainder of 1983, police worked tirelessly to reconstruct Sheri's final moments. Detectives retraced her walk to the bus stop. They interviewed classmates, teachers, neighbors, bus drivers, anyone who might have crossed paths with her that morning. Hundreds of leads were investigated. Every tip, no matter how small, was carefully documented. Yet none provided the breakthrough investigators desperately needed. The forensic evidence recovered from the crime scene became the investigation's greatest source of hope. Although DNA technology was still in its infancy during the early 1980s, investigators preserved every piece of biological evidence they believed might one day become important. At the time, they had no idea just how valuable that decision would become. As the years passed, the case slowly grew colder. Detectives changed assignments. Some retired. Others passed the investigation on to a new generation of investigators. But despite the passing decades, Sheri's file was never forgotten. Inside Michigan State Police, the case remained open, waiting for Sheri's family. The pain never faded. Every birthday reminded them of the 16-year-old girl who never had the chance to grow into adulthood. There would be no college graduation, no wedding, no children, no future, only memories, and an unanswered question that haunted them every single day. Who killed Sheri Jo Elliott? Across the country, science was changing. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, DNA testing had become one of the most powerful tools in criminal investigations. Cases once considered impossible to solve suddenly began producing answers. Convictions were secured. Wrongfully accused individuals were exonerated. Families who had waited decades finally learned the truth. Investigators wondered, could Sheri's case someday be one of them? As forensic technology continued improving, Michigan State Police repeatedly re-examined the evidence. Each advancement offered another opportunity, another chance, another possibility that the mystery could finally be solved. Still, the DNA profile did not immediately identify a suspect. The killer remained unknown. Years became decades. 40 years passed. Many people believed whoever committed the crime had escaped justice forever. Some wondered whether the killer was even still alive. Others questioned whether the truth would ever be known. But investigators refused to close the file because they believed one simple principle: evidence doesn't forget, even when people do. That determination led detectives to one of the most revolutionary investigative techniques ever introduced into criminal justice: forensic genetic genealogy. Unlike traditional DNA databases, this method allows investigators to compare crime scene DNA with publicly available family tree databases, identifying relatives of an unknown suspect before carefully building an entire family tree. It had already solved dozens of notorious cold cases across the United States. Now, investigators hoped it could finally speak for Sheri. Specialists painstakingly analyzed the preserved DNA evidence. Genealogists traced distant family connections. Names were added. Names were eliminated. Family trees stretched backward through generations. Months of painstaking research slowly narrowed the search. Eventually, one name rose above all the others. A man who had lived in Michigan during the time Sheri was murdered. A man investigators now believed deserved much closer scrutiny. For the first time in more than 4 decades, the investigation finally had direction. A direction built not on guesses, not on rumors, but on science. And what investigators would uncover next would finally bring Sheri Jo Elliott's family the answers they had spent 43 years waiting to hear. For more than 4 decades, Sheri Jo Elliott's case remained trapped between the past and the future. The evidence existed. The DNA existed. But the technology capable of identifying the man behind that DNA simply didn't. That would finally change. By the mid-2020s, forensic genetic genealogy had transformed cold case investigations across the United States. Cases that had remained unsolved for decades were suddenly being reopened. Families who had almost given up hope were finally receiving answers. Michigan State Police believed Sheri's case deserved the same opportunity. After 43 years, it was time to ask the evidence one more question. Who left this DNA behind? Specialists carefully re-examined the biological evidence collected in 90 ninties. Despite the passage of time, the samples had been preserved well enough for modern forensic analysis. Scientists developed a DNA profile suitable for advanced genealogical comparison. It was painstaking work. Every profile had to be verified. Every match had to be scientifically confirmed. There was no room for mistakes. The DNA did not immediately reveal the killer's name. Instead, it pointed investigators toward distant biological relatives. From there, professional forensic genealogists began reconstructing enormous family trees. Generation after generation, branch after branch, every possible connection was examined. Thousands of records were reviewed. Birth certificates, marriage records, military documents, obituaries, public archives. The investigation had become as much about history as it was about homicide. Slowly, the possibilities narrowed. Each eliminated family brought detectives closer to the truth. Eventually, one particular family line demanded closer attention. Within that family, investigators identified a man whose age, location, and background aligned with the evidence collected in 1983. For the first time in 43 years, detectives believed they had finally found the person responsible for Sheri's murder. But identifying a suspect through genealogy alone was not enough. Investigators still needed direct DNA confirmation. Without it, they could not officially close the case. The scientific standard remained the same. Evidence had to prove the conclusion. Not assumptions. Not coincidence. Only DNA. As detectives prepared the next phase of the investigation, events took an unexpected turn. Before authorities could arrest and formally question the suspect, he died by suicide. The opportunity to bring him before a courtroom, to hear his explanation, or to obtain a confession, was suddenly gone. For Sheri's family, it was another heartbreaking moment. After waiting more than 4 decades, The man investigators believed had taken Sheri's life would never stand trial. Even so, the investigation continued. Following the suspect's death, investigators lawfully obtained a DNA sample for comparison. Forensic scientists conducted a meticulous analysis. When the results returned, the answer was unmistakable. The DNA matched the biological evidence collected from Sheri Jo Elliott in 1983. After 43 years, science had finally spoken. The evidence identified the man investigators concluded was responsible for Sheri's abduction, sexual assault, and murder. For the detectives who had devoted years to the case, it was the breakthrough they had spent entire careers pursuing. Some had inherited the investigation from retired detectives. Others had joined decades after Sheri's murder. Together, they had accomplished what many believed was impossible. A cold case once considered unsolvable had finally been solved. Although the suspect would never face criminal prosecution because of his death, Michigan State Police were finally able to provide Sheri's family with something they had lived without since 1983. The truth. It could never erase the pain. It could never bring Sheri home. But after 43 years of uncertainty, it brought answers. And sometimes, answers are the first step toward peace. For more than 4 decades, Sheri Jo Elliott's name had appeared on lists of unsolved murders. Her case had outlived generations of detectives. It had survived changing technology, changing investigative methods, and changing times. Yet one thing had never changed: the determination to find the truth. When Michigan State Police officially announced that Sheri Jo Elliott's killer had been identified through forensic genetic genealogy and DNA confirmation, it marked the end of one of Michigan's longest-running murder investigations. The announcement was more than just another press conference. It represented 43 years of perseverance, 43 years of unanswered questions, and 43 years of refusing to let a victim be forgotten. For Sheri's family, the emotions were impossible to describe. There was relief that they finally knew who had taken their daughter away. There was gratitude for every detective, scientist, and forensic specialist who refused to give up. But there was also sorrow. The man identified as Sheri's killer had died before he could be arrested or stand trial. There would be no courtroom, no guilty verdict, no sentence handed down by a judge. Justice, in its traditional form, would never come. Even so, investigators emphasized that justice can take many forms. Sometimes, justice means identifying the truth. Sometimes, justice means restoring a victim's name after decades of uncertainty. And sometimes, justice means ensuring that history records exactly what happened. For Sheri Jo Elliott, that truth would no longer remain hidden. This case also demonstrated something remarkable about modern forensic science. When Sheri was murdered in 1983, no one could have imagined the technology that would exist decades later. The detectives collecting evidence back then had no guarantee it would ever solve the case. Yet they preserved it carefully. They documented everything. They trusted that one day, science might catch up. Their patience ultimately changed everything. Today, forensic genetic genealogy has rewritten the future of cold case investigations. Across the United States, hundreds of families who once believed they would never receive answers are now seeing decades-old cases reopened. Crimes once thought impossible to solve are finally reaching their conclusions. Sheri Jo Elliott's case now stands among those remarkable stories. A reminder that time does not erase evidence. and that the truth has a way of waiting patiently to be discovered. Although Sheri's life ended far too soon, her story continues to make a difference. It reminds investigators why every piece of evidence matters. It reminds families never to lose hope. And it reminds the world that every victim deserves to be remembered, not only for the tragedy that ended their life, but for the life they lived before it. Sheri Jo Elliott was more than a case file. She was a daughter, a teenager with dreams, a young woman whose future was stolen. And after 43 years, her voice was finally heard through the evidence she left behind. The story of Sheri Jo Elliott is a powerful reminder that justice is not always immediate, but that determination, science, and the pursuit of truth can overcome even the passage of time. If you found this documentary informative, please consider liking this video, subscribing to Whispered Pages, and turning on the notification bell so you never miss future true crime documentaries and in-depth case investigations from around the world. If you have any respectful thoughts or reflections about this case, share them in the comments below. Your engagement helps keep the memories of victims alive and honors the work of those who never stopped searching for answers. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, behind every case file is a real person whose story deserves to be told with truth, care, and respect. This is Whispered Pages.